Hi, my name is Chef Jake Osburn, and today we're going to be preparing Squash and Zucchini Rosettes, a summer tomato Italian sauce, and herb fluffed quinoa. We're going to start with the tomato sauce, just because normally I'd let that simmer for about 3 hours. We'll roll into the quinoa, and then we'll prepare the rosettes. You can do the rosettes either on the grill or in the oven, whichever you prefer. Ours is actually being done in a little tiny toaster oven, but that's awesome. So we're going to start out with some fresh tomatoes. This is about 2 pounds of tomatoes. We're not going to seed, concuss, or peel these. We're just going to go ahead and put them straight into the pot once we're ready. We will saute some of our onions and some garlic in there before we add these, but we'll get these nice and ready so that as soon as it is time for them to go in, we can chuck them in, get them seared up, and they can rock and roll. So I'm literally just cutting these into quarters. It's really a rough chop. You don't have to be exact with it because we are going to turn it into a sauce. Some people even like to puree them if you don't like big chunks of tomatoes or if you're cooking with children. That's a great way to do that. In each of our pans, we're going to put a splash of olive oil. We're going to let that get nice and hot. Just before it reaches its smoke point, we'll add our garlic and our onions. We want to mince our garlic. This is a nice fresh Italian garlic. We'll cut off the little stems here at the bottom before we crush them. Getting all of our little garlic peels everywhere. It's like confetti. And then you're just going to mash them up. And we're going to do half in each pan. And we'll do 2 of our spring onions. We can save those greens for later. We can use those for something else. And you don't have to use spring onions. You can use Vidalia or sweet or whatever suits your fancy, whatever you've got on hand or in the garden. We'll do half in each. We want a little bit of color on it, but not too much because your garlic will get a little bit bitter otherwise. Once your onions start to turn translucent, that's going to be when we add our tomatoes, and it's also going to be when we add our quinoa. As you can see, this saucepan here, it's getting a little bit further along. I'm going to add about half of my quinoa, which is 2 cups, and I'm going to saute that until it starts to crackle and pop, which will be about 3 to 5 minutes. Now I want to hold all of the heat for those inside the pot, so I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm just going to let it do its thing. You can hear the quinoa start to crack and popple. And you can smell it starting to smell a little bit nutty. That's how you know that it's getting close. We're going to add lemon juice and water. And we're just going to let that simmer for a minute, okay? Should be about 20 minutes. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start on our herbs. We're going to want some basil. So these are basil. This is a growing basil plant. So when you cut basil, if it's still alive, what you'll do is you'll dock it with either your finger or a pair of scissors where it grows the next set of leaves. So this one you could take right off at the top, or you can cut down a little bit further. Either way is completely fine. Or if you're not going to save the plant and you don't need it to grow, you can hack it right off. So for these, we're going to chiffonade these leaves, which is a knife cut, meaning ribbon-like. So what you'll do is you'll stack your leaves on top of one another over and over repeatedly so that you kind of have like a leaf sandwich. And you'll want all of your leaves to go the same direction. Now once they're all stacked up, like you see them here, you're going to roll them from one end to the other. So I like to start at the base, which is where it was connected to the plant, and tuck it and roll it really, really tight with just a couple of fingers. Now you're going to cut it slowly to make small, thin little ribbons. You'll want them to be really, really close together, and you can kind of use your fingers to guide it along as you go. And then you'll fluff them up, and you've got beautiful little ribbons. And then we're going to add in some oregano, some thyme, and some marjoram. So all of these guys, they kind of come on these heavy wooden stalks. If you take your fingers and you pinch around it, you can kind of just pull them all right off, and you get nothing but the leaves, which is the part that's full of flavor. Your stems are too, but you're going to want to boil that down in order to save that. All right, so you can just rough chop these up. All right, so we've got a nice little bowl of herbs here. we can go ahead and add some of these to our tomato sauce. You can see how the skins have started to crack and peel. Normally, you'll cook this for 3 hours, like I said, so those will break down and you won't notice them. If it's something that does bother you, you can go through a process called concussing, which is where you'd slice the tomato at the bottom, quickly boil it, and then ice bath it, just so that it breaks that down, and you can peel them all off. We're gonna add a nice, generous chunk of herbs. I like to add marjoram to this just because it makes it a little bit more savory. I'm going to keep some of those herbs and add parsley to that one for quinoa, which will be wonderful. Now, we don't want this one to have a whole lot of stalks in it either, but it's a little bit tender, so if you do leave stalks, it's not that big of a deal. And we're going to rough chop this one too, and this is going to be for our quinoa. Parsley isn't like the most flavorful of herbs, but it is going to add that nice pop of green, and it's going to add a level of freshness to it that really can't be achieved any other way, especially not without adding salt or fats or anything like that that would take away from its nutritional value. All right, so our quinoa is starting to puff up. It's looking really nice. We can go ahead and add these herbs to it. I did add a little bit of lemon juice and lemon rind to this just to help with that freshness as well. We'll let it sit a little bit, and then when it's done, it'll be ready to fluff. Those tomatoes are breaking down very nicely. And if you don't have big tomatoes like that, you can also use cherry tomatoes or any tomatoes that you can get your hands on. I like ones that are really acidic. Cherokee purples and lemon boys are like my absolute favorite. While these are still ripping, we're going to go ahead and make our rosettes with squash and zucchini. I use 2 ramekins, but you can also use cupcake tins if you'd rather, or if you don't have ramekins on hand. These ones are about 3.5 inches, but you can use larger or smaller depending on the size of the dish you want to prepare. So for our zucchini, we're just going to take the top and the bottom directly off. We can use those in stock. They're not necessarily waste, or you can throw them in your compost bin. What I did is I just docked the bottom off to create a flat surface. So we'll lay that flat down, and then we're going to make long ribbon-like strips with this so that we can wrap them around our ramekin to create the rosette. So the end one we're not going to use, so you can make sure that's really thin just to peel it off. And then you're going to go thin layer after another, And I like to use the very tip of my knife just to keep it really close and to guide my hand. So you have them real thin like this, and we can just leave those over here on the side, laying them out flat so that we can season them. You'll use about 1 zucchini, depending on the size of your zucchini, for each rosette. By the end of the summer, your zucchini will be crazy, and you can make a whole dozen of these with just 1. And we'll do the same exact thing with our summer squash. So we're just going to salt and pepper these guys, remembering to season nice and high. All right, so on the base of your ramekin, you're going to put your salt, or you're going to put your garlic and your onion and a little bit of olive oil. And then you're going to take your zucchini. Your zucchini is a little bit hardier than your squash. Your thickest pieces first. We're chefs, but we're not perfect. So you may have some that are thicker. The thicker ones tend to snap if you have to bend them too much. So if you place your thicker ones around the outside, you can start to create the first petals of your rosette. And now you're going to transition between zucchini and squash. So it's green to yellow, green to yellow, green to yellow. And that just adds some vibrance, adds some flavors. And as you're eating it, you can kind of peel them from the outside and eat each layer at a time. And eventually you'll make it to the middle and not be able to add another one. When you reach that point and they snap naturally, you can just kind of stack them together and plop them right in the middle. And plug the middle with them. And one ended up with zucchini in the middle, the other's ending up with squash in the middle. And if you don't have access to zucchini or summer squash just yet, you can actually change these out as well and use eggplant or use potatoes if you've got a kid that's a little bit picky. And you can roast them. So these guys then get herbs on top. So this has got marjoram, parsley, basil, thyme, and oregano. We're going to top it with a little bit of wine, and then they're going to go into the oven. They'll take about 20 minutes. You can also put them in a grill if you'd like. They go really nice with a little bit of smoke. All right, here they go. our quinoa is done. So I'm gonna pull that off the heat. It's real dense right now, but once we go ahead and we stir it up, it'll fluff up beautifully, and that's how you know it's done. All right, I'm gonna go grab the rosette out of the oven. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and build our plate. So we want quinoa as the base of our rosette. So we'll refluff our quinoa, add a little bit more herbs, and we'll place that. I've already tasted mine, but if you'd like to add a little more salt and pepper, which you don't necessarily need with the herbs, or you wanna add more lemon juice or lemon rind, now's the time to do it. But we're just gonna go ahead and put a few ounces right here in the middle. And we want those to build a nice little foundation for our rosette to sit on. Now with our rosette, we'll use a pair of tongs and we'll very carefully pluck him out. Set him in the middle, pinch his little sides in so he's perfect. Top him with all of his juices that he's been cooking with. Dress it with a little bit of our tomato sauce. Top it with a little bit of herbs. And you have a nutritionally sound, herbaceous dish that's vegetarian and vegan. And it's got a little bit of Chardonnay in it. Enjoy.